Well, I've got the pleasure. We are fashionally coordinated as well.
I know,
slightly.
we are actually, aren't we?
We should have talked
You
about
can
this
tell us.
during the week. I had the pleasure of sitting next to Harinder for lunch on Wednesday. So, Harinder, from Maverick Games, an exciting part of your career, working on this brand new venture, but I'm not going to talk too much about it because I don't know too much about it. So, but I'm going to get you to talk about it, which has to be the way to do it. So, let's start with, if we can go back before we go today and then forward, your career through games. When did it start? What was it like? Where have you been?
Where have I been? So maybe slightly different to a lot of people here is I never meant to be in games. Genuinely, so I was working in financial services. I was a financial controller for a business in Leamington actually, and knew that I wanted something new in my life, and saw a job advertised at Sega. And at the time, I saw it and I thought, wow, Sega, they still going, amazing. And thought nothing else of it.
What time was this? You say at that time?
This was
what do you reckon?
2007.
Okay, all right. 2007.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, just ignored it. But then a headhunter contacted me to say, I actually think you'll be a really good fit for this role. There was another job that I wanted at the time, which was, I laugh when I say this because it would have been so dull. It was I wanted to go and be the fleet accountant at the BMW garage in Leamington. That was the job that I wanted. So, but because I hadn't been interviewed for 7 years, I thought I'm going to go to that Sega. That's my practice interview.
Yeah.
And all these years later, who knew that was where I was supposed to be? So yeah, I started at the Sega Racing Studio in Solihull.
And where next? Where was your path through over the years then?
Sega sold us to Codemasters.
Okay.
And we all have to do our time at Codemasters. You know, if you're the right passage to if you're in the Midlands. So I went there for 12 months, and it was good. I enjoyed it. But then I left to have my baby.
Right. Okay.
So went to be a mummy, and took 14 months out to go and be a full-time mum, which I also loved. And then that's when my life changed a little bit because I went on to a friend of mine from Sega Racing Studio contacted me to say, hey, it's starting this new studio. Do you fancy coming back? And that was Sega Hardline. So that was when we were still in Solihull. Started off with 7 people that were they were the tech group at, if you have a problem with your project at Sega, they would send these guys in, they were the A team. And it was transforming them from being the tech group into being a proper development studio. At the time, we started off working on a Vita, Sony Vita project. That, like I'm sure many of you experienced, never saw light of day unfortunately, but it would have been really cool. And then very quickly transitioned to doing mobile games. So, and the first one being Sonic Dash, which also has seen its time here at Pixel Toys as well.
Yeah, I had a Sonic statue on our stand at Gamescom a few years ago when we were talking about great games. It was the most popular thing on the stand, obviously, but there were quite a few people coming up saying that's not made in the UK. It's an interesting success story that people perhaps don't know about. So that's a
well, and really interesting actually. Speaking to this Sonic IP holders whilst we were there, they pre the movie they didn't have enough interest from kids knowing who Sonic was. She showed them a picture, they didn't know who Sonic was. Yet our KPI showed that the biggest player base was actually up to 13. So there was definitely a community there, and it was a million DAU as well. So there was some kids playing that.
So you've thrown a couple of years out there, 2007, etc. I just wonder, what was not many people here, sorry to add a little bit of age to you, but we're just going to do that, I'm really sorry about that, but not many people here were perhaps in the industry at that time. What was it like in 2007? What sort of culture did those companies have? There definitely wasn't many people that looked like me. There definitely wasn't many women. It's really nice to see you all together, by the way. It is, I was probably
I think I was one or two actually in the studio. Yeah, it was a very male dominated, and actually white males. Let's be honest, that's what it was. And those actually is white middle-aged blokes, basically. That's what it was. It was pretty much
privileged as well, probably.
Oh yeah.
Most of us are privileged.
Yeah, didn't want to get into that yet, Sam.
We're going to get to that later,
we'll
are we? Oh my word. So, well, that must have presented some challenges then. So, how do you sort of navigate those challenges? Did it mean you changed your approach at all? And I'm obviously building up to what you're doing today and the different approaches that you take. But I suppose what are the things that you learned at those stages working for those companies? And we're not just talking about the culture here. We'll also talk about. You've worked for some of the largest games companies in the UK. There's going to be some good stuff. There's going to be some bad stuff. But what have you learned from working in those companies?
That's a very good question. I think let's talk about the bad first. There was lots of frustrating times. Right? It was lots of frustrating where, as a woman, you almost weren't listened to. You know, you'd get somebody would I'd ask a question, and they would respond by answering to my male colleague quite often. You know, rather than to me, which was really annoying. So do you know what? I think I was quite bullish, and I think that's probably how I fought it a little bit. I was lucky because my male colleague was definitely an ally. I think that made a big difference, and it is important to have allies around you. But I suppose by being in the industry, and I think this is one of the most important things, is that if you can see it, if people can see it, they'll believe it, and they can actually see that there's a place for them there. And that was always my thought process. I didn't want to give up. There's lots of times when I thought I was going to give up because nobody takes you seriously. Quite often being referred to as my male counterpart's PA. Yeah. I didn't. That was. I think for me, I tried to fight it a little bit more, and I think I was quite angry about certain things when those things came about, and then I tried to. I think I tried to push it a little bit further, and I got angry with the people in the room, where it's actually, and it's a little bit maybe like Steve was saying, that's not the way to do it, almost. So I decided just to be really nice, actually. Just really nice.
Defeat them with kindness.
Defeat them with kindness, and actually, and flip it to being a really nice culture, actually. Being in an environment where actually people want to be. So Steve, thank you for Steve and everything that I'm going to say. It's kind of so see what Steve says. Having an environment where people actually wanted to be. And there wasn't many studios at the time where the culture was great. It was. I mean, everybody cared about the game, and I'll be honest. For me, it's not about the game. It's about I care that the people that are making the game care about the game. You know, so it's about making sure they were surrounded with the right place where they could they wanted to be every day.
Well, that representation point is interesting. It's still something we struggle with a little bit today. We were just talking earlier here that the games industry is 25% women, 25% of full-time employees are women. There's still a long way to go, isn't there?
Yeah.
You know, half of our players are women, so wouldn't it be nice if half of our creators were women? So there's still an enormous challenge there. I think things are getting better. Partly with the stuff that you're doing at your new company, which we'll come on to in a second. But what about good things? Working for some of these major businesses, very clever people, really dynamic organisations. Are there things that you learnt that you're now applying today?
Oh yeah, absolutely loads. I think, so when I was, slightly lead on to the next thing I did after Sega, I suppose, because at Sega, we didn't even know what we didn't even know about setting up a studio, and I think that's probably, anyone that has, they'll realise that there is so much that you don't even realise you need to be thinking about and doing. So my learning really came was when I actually went to SEMA Leamington, where there was two of us setting up the studio from scratch in Leamington, and just going in with a mindset of, I knew what worked. We actually did know, because actually Hardlight is a great studio. It continues to be a great studio, actually. So we knew what worked, we knew what didn't. We knew the kind of things that came to bite us on the ass 2 years in, you know, that you don't even think about. So it was really thinking about how we would do things differently. So it was, again, on the culture, making sure that's right. Thinking about training. We had a training budget at Sega. We used to say to people, you can spend it as you wish, but nobody does because there's never enough time. So actually starting with putting training days in, to actually having almost kind of mandatory days in where people do training, and actually sometimes it's not about the cost of training, it's making sure that people have the time to be able to do it. So it was those things. So, and Sumo is an amazing company, right? It is really amazing. So the learnings that I've taken from there really is the conversations I had with those 3 founders at
Right.
Sumo,
Okay.
about why they started initially. You know, they started because they'd been made redundant, and they wanted to just set a studio where it was, family and stability. That's what the 2 core values that Sumo have been created on, and that's, the choices they made were always about, if we go down this path, is it going to affect the people we've got here? Because if it does, we shouldn't do it. So there's some of the things that I've kind of taken through to what we're doing today.
And they employ a lot of people now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough to keep that. I mean, how do you keep that sort of culture going when you've got 1,400 people?
Yeah,
It must be difficult.
It is, but I think, again, the smart thing that they do is they invest in leadership teams. So it's having the right leadership teams in place and actually letting them do what they do best. And each of those studios, you could be working in Sumo Leamington, go to Sheffield, it's like a completely different place. So it's making sure people know that, so they have, attrition doesn't need to be moved. People don't need to move out of Sumo. You can actually move in between different studios and have a different project, a different way of working. So they're all very, they're brilliant studios, all of them.
But if you're in Leamington, why would you go to Sheffield? That's the question you've got to ask yourself.
I agree.
Yeah. Apologies if anyone here's from Sheffield. Probably should have checked.
There's Carl Caven in the back end.
No. Yeah, I'd be running if that was the case. Anyway, and the recent decision, you've broken free. I don't know if that's the right phrase. You can tell me whether it is or not. But I perhaps didn't realise actually when I was crafting these questions that you'd been involved in so many sort of in effect startup businesses with 2 of you. But maybe this is a rubbish question now. But what's the motivation behind setting up your own thing and almost not going solo? There's a small group of you.
Yeah.
But what's the motivation behind that?
So I didn't go looking for this in lots of ways because I was really happy at Sumo, really, really happy. But it came to me where a mutual friend introduced me and Mike Brown, who's our creative director, and we instantly got on. And the whole thought process around everything we do is about encouraging people to take risks.
Okay.
Actually, so being a maverick, as we will call it, and what that means is actually we've all been in places where we wanted to push that boundary a little bit more. You just think, God, if we could just do this, if we could just change things slightly, or if we didn't have somebody that was, telling us we can't do something, even though you can't see the reasons for why that's the case, which was actually at Sumo, well, we'd just do things and ask for forgiveness, which is absolutely what you should all do. But it's about encouraging people to be more like that. Actually, we want to be completely transparent. We want to have an environment where people come in, they should feel proud of what their input is onto the game. So it's a new set of people, I suppose, where it's we don't want to be the norm. We want people to be their whole self, and this is about creating a place of belonging where nothing else matters. Nothing matters about the fact that you want to be here, and we encourage people to be. And our team is very inspiring. There's no doubt about it. So part of that is actually, you are the very best at what you do. So we're going to surround you with that right environment. And fulfillment is a word that I use quite a lot because actually we've taken money off the table because we have gone with salary transparency. So we know that everybody's paid fairly. So that's no longer an issue, right? So how do we get fulfillment? So we surround them with we get to understand you as an individual, and then our job is about how fulfilling and continue to make this your dream job. And that was the conversation I had with Mike to start with.
So I'm going to keep going.
And what we talked about, actually, we sat there for about 3 hours and we talked about vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that's where the conversation started. And Yeah, and like I said, if somebody told me, and I did say this to these guys earlier, if somebody told me 12 months ago I was going to go set a studio up with a load of playground people, like, no freaking way. But look, it's a very different bunch of people, so it's really exciting.
It's interesting. So you're talking about that. It sounds like quite an easy decision then, when you meet the right people and the conversations go right. But there's still that risk element, and let's get down to the details. What do you do on day one? You know, you've suddenly decided to have your own studio. What's the first thing you do? Because a lot of people here have, I suppose, been through it, and your experience might be different. But what do you do?
So, so dull. Sorry,
Dull.
Which had a really cool answer to
some
this.
massive
but
team
but
building
actually,
exercise.
honestly,
No.
day 2 was a bit like that.
Okay.
So day 1 was literally, let's set our kit up. Sorry, it's the same no matter where you are. It was, let's make sure all this
The
stuff is
IKEA
working.
experience.
Yeah,
So
it was.
you had
It
to
was.
build it all.
Yeah, we didn't have a studio on day 1, so we were actually at the Motorcycle Museum, and we'd got a room there, and they put us into the most grandest boardroom. It was amazing. So we were all sat there, and we were trying to get our kit working and making sure everything, and then we went for lunch.
Yeah.
Finished at 4. You know.
You got your kit working, but then did
Day
you use
2.
it?
Day
Did
2.
it
No, well,
stop
day
making
2.
anything, or-
Day 2 was when we had the white walls, got loads of post-it notes out, and we started thinking about what the Maverick journey is all about. And we talk quite often about the Maverick journey because that we want people to be on that journey with us quite a while, and I think it's important for people to understand what that potentially could look like for them, and that's part of how people get fulfillment. So we started mapping down, we had post-it notes where it's like, right, what does pre-boarding look like? What does day 1 look like? What does week 1 look like? What does month 1? And we literally sat down and we talked about, actually a lot of it came down to actually our past experiences and what we didn't want people to feel. Because sometimes that's what it's about. If you really focus down onto how you felt and how you felt at certain points in your career, and it's not been great, it's taking those things away. So we quite often refer to how does it feel? How does it feel for the people, and how does each of those points feel? So, and then mapping it back to what we were actually going to do around those. And day 2 is actually when we talked about salary transparency, which was just great.
And how many times did you find yourself in the first couple of days saying, that's what's being a Maverick's like? You know, is that something you say to each other all the time? Is that your little phrase?
Well, so with the salary, no. I tell you, so when we talked about the salary transparency, we had this conversation, and we talked about the reasons why maybe we should do it and shouldn't do it, and then it was Mike actually that turned around and said, but it sounds like a very Maverick thing to do, that was like, well, you've got to do it now, you've got to do it. So, and we do talk about Maverick, because when you're the way we refer to it is when we're trying to recruit people, we talk about be a Maverick. And actually what we're looking for, and a lot of that comes from, we actually have people writing covering letters to us where it says, this is what I think, this is why I think I'm a Maverick, and which is great. But then once you are part of the team, it is I am a Maverick, and part of that, and even down to performance reviews and the way that we do things, it is about what that definition is.
It's interesting. So you talk about, if Mike was sitting here and I said, what was the motivation for setting up this studio, would he say, there was this really great idea for a game I had, or because you're talking about, you've not mentioned anything about the creative process, the game creation. It's the culture that you're leading with.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is that that everyone's bought into that? That's the okay.
So part of the conversation, that original conversation I had with Mike was, obviously he has led on Forza Horizon for quite a while, and the team that we have, a lot of them were ex-leadership team from off Forza Horizon, so they've made great games. They know how to make great games, and better than great games, they've made console-selling games, right? So that's quite a thing. So that's the one thing that we know we've got to keep from Playground, and then the environment around it that was the big focus to start with. We have got a game idea as well, but I don't need to talk about that because again, it's not about the game for me.
Yeah.
It's not about what we do. It's about how we do it.
I've not got here. No, ask you what the game is.
Thank God, because I couldn't answer it.
That'll come next time. We'll get to that.
Yeah, you can ask mine.
And if we look around the room, there's quite a few sort of start-up businesses here. People finding their way, sort of fledgling. Maybe it's their first job or second job. Because it all sounds quite idyllic so far, if you don't mind me saying it. Maybe it is, but what are the bumps in the road?
I know this is going to sound like I'm lying, but it isn't. We've not really hit the bumps in the road yet. We might do very soon. I'm sure we will. But there's been lots of.
I've seen Steve's curve. There's lots of bumps in that road. You know, this is.
I think because as a leadership team, we're all aligned. One of the most difficult things, I think, when you're starting a studio is having the right leads and the right leadership team in place. Well, we have people in each of those disciplines, right? So that is a good start, and that is something that I haven't had before in previous studios, and know how difficult it is to bring those people in. So that was a big plus to start with, and quite lucky because I've all worked together before. Other than me, I'm the new person, so that helped. I suppose one of the things that the adjustment has come from, because those guys hadn't started a studio before. Obviously, I've got that experience, but also then coming out from a big corporation where things are already there. You don't even think about some of the things; they're just there, and we've had to do all those things from day one. So there's been times where we've come to a certain point, assuming that that's going to be there, and thought, oh no, oh shit, we've got to do that. We've got to do that.
I hope they're sharing it, if we're talking about the rubbish tasks. You've got to share them around, haven't you?
We do share them around, actually, I've got to be honest. Yeah, there is. We've all got.
Is there a shit chart on the wall and you allocate all the horrible tasks to
Yeah, you do that, you do that.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Actually, I've got nothing bad to say about them, because they're actually pretty good at just picking up stuff and just getting it done.
They're not here. You can say whatever you want.
I'm
right,
genuine.
Okay, well let's look at final question from me.
Okay, go on.
Roadmap. What's the plan? What's the big plan that you're prepared to share?
I suppose the plan is to grow the studio to 55-ish by the end of this year. We're already way ahead of our hiring plan, which is great. So we're well on track for that. And then overall, the studio will be 140, 150. We are based in Warwick at the minute because all the good spaces are taken here. There's a great space that I previously signed with CMO just across the road, which I might just kick myself about now, so that would have been very convenient. But we've got a space in Warwick and it's a space that we can grow, so we will likely to stay there, and we're really happy with there. And then I think other than the general noise that we have been making with disruptive policies and just talking about who we are, you won't see a game announcement from us for quite a while. We're working on it's a AAA project, open world, so it's going to take us a few years to get there.
Okay, lovely. Nice, ambitious. That's what we like to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Harinder. We do have a chance for a couple of questions if we want to get through a couple of quick questions. Wonderful, thank you.
Regarding diversity, how different is the challenge in setting that tone in a new studio versus retrospectively doing that in an old one?
That's a really good question. I think, I suppose the advantages are you don't have people already in those places, so it means you can be really selective about who you want. And we have been really lucky. We've already got a really diverse team. I think that also comes from we've got 2 women in our leadership team. We've got people of colour within our team. So actually, for me, it's not about talking about it. It's doing it, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to show that actually by doing things slightly different, like writing your job descriptions in a different way, and going with actually having the salaries on the job descriptions, that in itself, it encourages a more diverse workforce as well.
Interesting, thank you. Any further questions? If Mr. Stops, yeah?
Firstly, I'm a big fan of Harinder, just
Big fan of Harinder. Okay, I'll repeat that.
When
Yeah.
we came in earlier, so a couple of people mentioned, they said about the art of creatives and stuff. What people don't know is we couldn't have done the art of creatives if it wasn't for Harinder back in the day. She was kind of instrumental in us setting it up. So and Harinder would never say that, so I just wanted to put that out there. But my actual question is, so you, like myself, you don't come from a games background, and other than your your obvious transferable skills in your finance background, what do you think it brings a different perspective in someone?
Yeah, good question, Stephen. Thank you. I think it does because the thing I see here versus other industries is this is your hobby. This is actually what you want to do, right? So that brings a different type of person. Whereas it's not a job. It's not a job. This is what people choose to do. So having been in a place before where it is a job for lots of people, I think the differences in what and the way that I work with people is about understanding that, and actually similar to, we were talking about this slightly earlier as well, Steve, weren't we? In the fact that because it's a hobby, and you just sometimes you just get into the flow and you don't know when to walk away, right? So I think encouraging people to be step away from the machine, have a life outside work. It's really important because I know this is your hobby, but it's actually really important to go and do something else as well. So I think it's made me view people differently as well, and grateful for the people that we have in our team because of it.
Amazing. Thank you very much. We'll move on. You stick around afterwards.
I am,
So
yes.
people, go and have a chat with Harinder if you have any further questions. And thank you so much. Woo!